Well, hello everybody and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are here for another week of our Turning Towards Life conversation, and you are all so welcome to be with us. Thank you. I know, Lizzie, and we know that there are some people who've been with us right since we started this more than 7 years ago, and then there are other people who come and go, join us now and again when it feels right, and other people who all the time who are joining us afresh. So I just wanted to say to everyone, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us. And we have a wonderful source this week brought to us by Lizzie. And before we jump into that, Lizzie, I just want to say it's December 2024 as we're recording this. In the UK, we're heading into the mid-winter holiday period. I'm only saying it that way because I know in the Southern Hemisphere, people are heading into the midsummer holiday period. And I want to wish everybody, if you're listening or watching us at this time, a nourishing season. And to say you might be watching us on our Turning Towards Life website, or on the podcast, or on YouTube, or on our Facebook group, which everyone is very welcome to join. And if you would like to support us in some way, you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, maybe when you've listened to this conversation, or you could head over to Turning Towards Life, where you can sign up to get these conversations in your email inbox, and you can even support us by metaphorically buying us a cup of coffee, which is always a wonderful thing when it happens. And thank you to all of those of you who are supporting us that way. And I think, Lizzie, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Justin. Welcome, everyone. So we have this small source today, and it's called Play. And I'm not sure we've had the topic of play between us yet, Justin. I mean, yes, we have in lots of ways, but not as a source. So this is by someone called Gowmon, who I don't know very well, but I have found this quote and wanted to bring it here as a place to spring off from, as we normally do, and wonder about this in our lives. So here we go, and thank you, Vince, for writing these words. Play isn't something separate from the daily grind of life. Play isn't something separate from the daily grind of life. It is not something to finally get to when work ends. Rather, play, like music, is a force that we feel in our bones and that whispers in our heart. As kids demonstrate, play is not over there, but forever here and now.
Thank you, Lizzie. So I'm going to read it too. Play isn't something separate from the daily grind of life. It's not something to finally get to when work ends. Rather, play, like music, is a force we feel in our bones and that whispers in our heart. As kids demonstrate, play is not over there, but forever here and now.
Thank you, Justin. So I chose this source, Justin, because I can feel this whole thing of finally getting to it when work ends. Like, there's so much that's so kind of serious about the world, about the day, getting through the day. And I just feel confused about where it all came from, that playfulness couldn't be at the centre of things that are filled with responsibility, or things that are important, or things that are crucial to human life. And I wonder, a world where play is more central, like what would that be like? And how might it help in the situations that feel hard and feel arduous and feel like it feels life-giving to me to be playful? And who knows what's coming up is, maybe it's a luxury to be playful, or maybe it's just it's a right. I don't know. I'm really in this inquiry of, I can feel in myself how wonderful it is to feel playful and to feel free to be playful. And I'm feeling really in the middle of the question of what would it bring? Is it allowed? Are we is it the kind of thing that's a luxury and we only get to it when we have done our work, or when things aren't so serious anymore, or when things aren't so hard anymore? Or does it have a place that's central wherever we are, whatever's going on, instead of it being reserved for the nothingness time when everything is just fine? Because it doesn't seem to me like everything is ever really just fine. Like there's always something happening in the world that's hard and horrible. There's always something to be done. There's always something to be serious about, because life has that in it. So then, if that's true, when would we get to playing anyway?
I'm musing whilst you're talking, Lizzie, about playfulness right now, even as we're doing this. Like, it seems to me that this source invites exactly that kind of question. And I suppose the way it's such a great way in your way in immediately to ask about permission. Such an interesting place to start, because so in so many of the things that you just said is it allowed, and can we, and is it appropriate, and I think maybe that's exactly why this is such a good question, because it starts to poke away at the assumptions we make about appropriateness and allowing, and what those might be for. It's striking me right now that there is, so it seems to me that the shallow way to take on this question, which I'm sure we're not going to do, would be to sort of make a big polarity between seriousness and silliness, and to go, well, we should never be serious. We should just sort of like float away through our lives somehow, and ignore all the seriousness. Which I think is a temptation for many of us sometimes as a way of escape. And there are certainly times to set aside all seriousness, like kind of sanctioned, joyful, exuberant, crazy silliness really has its place. Like, I do think we need to put down the weight of our seriousness sometimes. And there are many spiritual paths that have times when that happens. You know, religious festivals and all kinds of things where everyone gets silly all at the same time, everyone gets playful all at the same time, and it's a very necessary response to the kind of living at one pole. And like you said, there's always really serious stuff in the world. Like, we might be in a serious situation ourselves, or we might have serious responsibilities to others, or we might be feeling into the enormous difficulties in the world and feeling how serious that is. But I was thinking, as you were talking, about how play can be a bridge between different ends of this polarity. If one end is seriousness and one end is a kind of frivolousness, like where we're not taking things seriously, even though that's also called for, if the weight of our lives tends to swing towards seriousness, or maybe even over seriousness, which I also think is possible to get into, then play might be a sort of antidote to that, or it might be a way of holding together both poles, because play can be serious and silly at the same time. Like, we can play a game to win it, for example, to have an outcome that we want to have happen, or we can play in order to cooperate with other people, or we can play in order to bust through rules or expectations that we might be holding that don't have any place here now. They're not even sometimes it seems to me, I'm really talking about myself here rather than anyone else. It's possible to sort of wear the mask of seriousness as if somehow that's going to make me safe. If I look serious enough and I feel serious enough, then I'll be able to be serious enough in order to address all the difficulties that I have and the difficulties of the world. But sometimes that itself is a kind of prison that stops me from taking the right kind of responsibility and care for the things that are serious. And I know that, Lizzie, I'm guessing maybe many of us have met people like this, and I know that I can sometimes touch into this myself. That when we meet somebody who's got who we know is really serious about life. In other words, takes life with the requisite kind of care that we need to live, and knows what's important and attends to what's important, and at the same time carries themselves with a sort of sparkle and lightness and twinkle to them. We know that a huge space of possibility opens up around that, where we can okay, so I know where I've been going with this. I'm sort of feeling what the outcome of this is. The end of that sentence is where we know we can bring ourselves more fully than we have done so far. And so over seriousness in the face of what is serious has this unintended and maybe it's intended, but this unfortunate consequence that it has us leave a lot of ourselves out. We have to exile a huge amount of us because maybe it won't belong, because it's not serious enough. And life-giving capacities and all kinds of wisdom might actually have been exiled there. And playfulness might be what allows us to bring them back in, even when we're dealing with something really hard or something really complex or something that's going to take a lot of time or something that we don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe playfulness is exactly what's called for, because it brings in our hearts and our bodies and our creativity and our sense of safety and our connection with other people, and all of those things that for many of us can get really lost when we over dial up the seriousness in response to the serious situation that we might be in.
Really appreciating this feeling of finding a way into what we're talking about. And like so many times in Turning Towards Life, I suddenly now don't know what play means, like as a word. I'm like, well, I thought I had a sense of it, and now I'm like, oh no, I don't think I know what it is. Because you could play, like you said, in a really serious, like some games are played in a very serious way, really quietly, really still, really, they're strategic or something. There's some concentration required and a furrowed brow, and it's a thinking game, or there's maybe a feeling game or a bodily game. Like there's all kinds of games that we can play. And so then what does play mean? So there's a kind of big old question there right now hanging for me. But when you were talking as well, Justin, I was thinking, about the function of the fool in Shakespearean world, of some kind of truth being told in amongst the drama, and how alleviating that is to the system that is the play and the audience and the happening that's happening. And then when you started talking about the parts of ourselves that we get access to around play or lightness or sparkle, I think was the word that you used. And the story that came back to me, there's a few times in my life really that play has come in places that, well, many times actually, where it's really bad or it's really serious or it's really mundane or inappropriate or whatever. And actually, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of many, many times. And one of them was when I was in my early 20s, I had a very lovely boyfriend whose parents were very serious. And like you say, they just cared about stuff really beautifully. Like the recycling and the kind of very domestic things were very important. They were held as if they were very, very big, important things. And they are. And the way they were held was quite intensely serious as well. So if you didn't do it right, for example, it was quite a big thing. And there's a lot of education about the recycling and all this stuff. And I remember one day, and this person's dad was the particular serious one in the household. And I remember one day something made him laugh, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. And in my system was like the deepest kind of relief of like, oh, it's okay. Like we can all be much more than we thought we could be, because it was so restrictive, the seriousness. Like, oh, I've got to, the person who is in charge here is very serious, and that kind of set the tone of what I could be in myself. And then when he laughed, and bless him, I still feel him like in my heart. He's such a very lovely, kind man. He was an English teacher. He was a German man, an English teacher. So he loved me because I was English, and he could always talk about language and all the wonderful things about language and in the English language with me, which he loved dearly. And this time when he laughed, I could feel all kinds of me could come online because of the freedom that he afforded me in his laughter. And it was a really big experience for me because I could then talk to him about things I hadn't talked about before, and I could be with him in a way, and I could joke with him, and I could. There was this other set of permissions that got given because he told me about a part of him that I hadn't seen before by being light and filled with laughter, that told me that that part, even though it's obscured sometimes, is actually still here all the time because of the way and the power of his laughter. And so I'm feeling into that meaning of play, that meaning of taking life lightly, where, as you say, it gives ourselves and everyone around us a different set of permissions to be a bigger range than the seriousness that we might take ourselves with. And I think that's the other thing is, taking ourselves seriously is quite different than taking ourselves lightly, taking others really seriously and forgetting that they're also light as well as serious, and being an invitation for this part of us to be present, because it feels like a big central life-filled part of humanness is this. And the other story, Justin, that popped into my mind was being on the train one day, and here in London, commuting is a very serious business. And so everybody goes into some weird kind of train or tube mode. And I was on the way home one night, and we were all on our own, like individuals. There was no kind of people who knew each other in this carriage. And someone started laughing. And everyone kind of started slightly sniggering. And by the time I got to my stop, the whole carriage was laughing at nothing. There was the person who was laughing at the beginning knew why they were laughing, and no one else knew why they were laughing. We were all laughing. And I remember thinking, oh, what a blessed relief, all these years of being on the train and being serious, and all of a sudden this injection of all of our real lives actually coming into the train, when this facade has been mainly what the train experience has been made of for me. And I think probably most people are telling that story at some point in their life because it was a real happening. It was so different to the normal experience, and everyone just went their separate ways. No one reviewed it or said anything. People just kept getting off on their stops or whatever. And those experiences where laughter comes in contexts where it maybe hasn't belonged before feel like really significant pieces of my life, where there's a relief and like you said, like a permission to be something other than the thing that got prescribed in the beginning because we were all taking ourselves too seriously.
Well, I think I'll carry the image of the train carriage with me for a long time. I think it sounds so wonderful. And what I'm thinking as you're talking, Lizzie, is about how, in a way, what we're talking about is that which will puncture or open up our rigid way that we hold ourselves in order to feel okay about ourselves, in order to look a particular way. And so much of the ways that we carry ourselves are sort of a defense against our own inner criticism or against the expected criticism of others. And maybe in a world that's got where there's so much polarization around, and we're so certain of one another's goodness or badness depending upon which group you're in. And that's the sort of the air of the world in many ways at the moment. Play can seem so threatening because play, if you think about all other dimensions of play, laughter is one, laughter and twinkle is one, and like serious strategy game playing is another. But the other kind of way to look at play is as a kind of improvisation, which is where we try out being a way that might bring something that wasn't the way that we just were the moment before. Like we're moving from one thing to another, and to move from one thing to another, like from seriousness to laughing, for example. Or I have to say, for anyone whose defense strategy is just endless silliness, from silliness to seriousness, it is the similar move. So But to make that move, to allow ourselves to make the move, is to dissolve our something, or to soften our rigidity. Is to say, I don't always have to be this way, and you don't always have to be that way either. And that can both be so relieving, like when everyone's in hysterics on the train. And for any of us who've been who've tended to have a more sort of earnest end of things, I have to say that those moments where we cannot control ourselves because hysteria is, laughing hysteria is rolling out, and you just can't stay out of it. It's both so terrifying and so relieving to have a great big belly laugh. But I think that play as an always present possibility for us. Like I might be different in the next moment. I might allow a different something of myself to show up, like I would if I was a comedy improv person. That kind of play also we really benefit from, because goodness, I know in me earnestness has been a peril. So I can easily wear earnest, like being really serious about something. And if I'm really serious and I furrow my brow and I really go for it, then I'll solve all the problems, and then I'll also look good in the process. And it's so scary to think I might let go, and I might just say something different, or hold my body differently, or move differently, or even just laugh at the craziness of it all. That all can feel so confronting, but it's also so liberating. It's also so permission giving for other people. And when we know that when we know that we've got a shared commitment, like when we know that we're serious about making a community, or being environmentally responsible, or pursuing a cause, or being skillful parents, or being a wonderful partner to someone else, when we know that we've got that shared commitment, play there can be, in the context of that shared commitment, play can be an enormous liberator. And of course, in a bigger sense, sometimes it can be an enormous disruptor that blows apart things that we think we ought to be committed to that maybe we don't, when we can sort of poke fun at things. And the thing that I've been thinking of is, for years, I'm thinking about, for any of us for whom, I'm definitely talking to those of us who are at the more earnest end of the spectrum, for whom the play thing has been more difficult. I've learned over the years how fantastic it is to have practices of play. So for example, for about 8 years, a very, very dear friend of mine who is very committed to play invited a group of us who met at a comedy improv evening into a WhatsApp group called Play, and we play one game which is called Jever, like Did You Ever? And the way it works is somebody says Jever, and then you have to, each person just adds one word at a time, until somebody decides it's over, and you put a question mark, and you get something like the most recent one that we completed was, did you ever coast nonchalantly along whilst running? Question mark. That's it. But it's been made by people from all around the world, adding one word at a time. And what I find about being part of this group, is that every now and again a word will pop in to my WhatsApp. Just one word will appear, and I'll go back and have a look, and then something awakens in me, like, oh, I wonder what word will be my word. And what I notice is, it's really, really tempting to be really good at it. Oh, I'm going to have the best word and everyone's going to be very impressed with me. Or to try and game it. Like, I know which way the sentence is going to go. I'm going to put my word in because I've got this fantastic thing the way I want it to work out. And it never goes the way I want. The more serious and the more controlling I am about it, the more stumped everyone else gets. And all of the delight is in the surprising something coming in that I wasn't expecting. And so actually, in order to play this, I have to do a lot of, softening, noticing my own protective patterns, giving away control, letting other people in, which is one of the great pitfalls of seriousness, is that we don't let other people in. And when we're playing, we have to let other people join us and participate with us. And it's been such a fabulous thing to have even just a little practice with a group of people, to say people who mostly I don't know very well, we're going to play together and we're going to keep going. And I'm using it as a way to spot all the ways I don't play and the costs of that. So I'm feeling very grateful for other people who, last thing to say, I've realized as we've been talking about it in a way so far, at least maybe the way I've been talking about it is like play something I have or I don't have, or I'll be playful or not. But now, of course, it's occurring to me that play is participatory, reciprocal, relational. How good it is to find people who will play with us rather than me taking on play as another serious project that I have to do well.
Yes. I'm so loving this feeling of play being like an interrupter. Play being a something that we can tune into, that we can use, that we can have, that we can engage with as a means of turning things around on their heads if we wanted to, like to have it as an interrupting force, to have it as a kind of a thing to invite in when we can feel our rigidity, when we can feel our, I need things to be a certain way, and that we can do it in community and we can find ways of feeling the freedom of not being in our own rigidness for a little while. And I'm feeling the centrality of that and the importance of it as a conscious bringing in to our lives. So I'm really grateful for this conversation. And as usual, going, oh gosh, I didn't understand this, even though I thought I did. And then here we are. And I feel like we could talk about it forever as well. There's all kinds of ways of talking about this, and it's kind of growing in me as we're talking. So thank you, Justin, for being playful with this. And maybe this is also play, like it's conversational play. We don't know what's going to happen. We're always kind of undone in some way by it. And it's not what we already know in a way. Like, I think that's part of the quality of play. It's an imaginalness in one way. Like, we're just imagining our way in to being in relationship with one another and talking and finding distinctions about life together. It's like it's a game. It's a beautiful game. So thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. And I'm imagining you all in some way skipping, sparkling a little from the conversation and wondering, maybe we can be a little bit more playful today and see what gift that brings us. I'm certainly going to try it now as I go out of the door into the beautiful mayhem of my house. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Vince, and thank you Justin as well, and we'll see you next week.